What is going on, beautiful people? Welcome back to the Airport Road Podcast. I'm your host, AJ, along with my co-host, Cade, who's not here today. I'm going to solo ride it today because we've been missing out on some podcasts and we have not filmed something in a couple weeks. And we miss doing those. We just have a hard time getting them done. So we're just going to get them done today. So you guys are going to have to put up with me all by myself. Without Cade, I guess I can talk about a little more of the touchy topics that I want to talk about typically. Not that Cade ever shies me away from those, but I don't like arguing with people, so I want to talk about some of that stuff now. So one of the topics that's been a huge topic of discussion for whatever reason, I know the reason, but for whatever reason in our office lately has been the mask usage. Now, everyone obviously has their very own feelings about masks, right? That is a foregone conclusion at this point. I mean, we're a year in. Some people still don't. Some people still think they can get away without wearing masks, which blows my mind. And I just messed up my mic. Anyway, I think at this point it's a foregone conclusion and pretty obvious who you can tell who feels what way about masks. You can just look at people and you kind of know. It sounds horrible to say. I don't like to say that about people. You never want to just judge people by looking at them. But when you talk to somebody and you can see what they're doing on social media and you can see what they're doing out and about, it's very, very obvious how people feel about that situation. I myself, I've been a huge mask wearer since the beginning. I'm fully vaccinated. I've talked about that on the show before. I got the Johnson & Johnson before it was an issue, which sucks because now I was stoked to get the Johnson & Johnson because one shot, I'm done. I got very sick from it, is what it is. I would have done it 100 times over, but now everyone tries to one-up each other on their vaccines. It's immediately, I'm vaccinated. What do you got? You got the Pfizer? You got the Moderna? And I immediately tell them what I got and I get judged, which sucks. Right? You see memes online now that Johnson & Johnson's by far the worst, which I don't blame them. Don't blame them at all because that is definitely the only of the three vaccines so far. That one has the most issues. So I get it. I totally get it. However, I'm a huge proponent. The thing that kind of sparked this idea of mask wearing still lately was the CDC guidelines that had come out and said that for those who are fully vaccinated, you no longer need to wear your mask outside unless you're in a large group of people, obviously. Some people took those words and they twist them so hard. You see a lot of people that you still see people that are saying the CDC doesn't know what they're talking about. They're still changing their opinions and they're changing what they're saying and blah, blah, blah. If some people don't have to wear their mask, I'm not going to wear my mask. And I just think that's so stupid. I'm the kind of person where I'm going to wear a mask regardless. Yeah, I am fully vaccinated. I'm fine. I'm good. My fiance is fully vaccinated. We have a 2-year-old son who I know the chances of him getting severely sick are pretty low from this virus. Regardless, I don't even want him to get it because I know they're not zero. So, we still be careful for him. But not only that, I just would feel horrible if I'm walking around. I already know the looks I'll get if I walk around without a mask. Because I give those looks to people who walk around without masks now. And it's hard. I want people to know that I'm judging them. I'm that kind of person. If I see somebody in the store not wearing their mask, or if they're all up in my shit, like if they're behind me, I'm standing in line, there's constantly people who still standing like right up against me, touching me. And I hate that. I hated that even before COVID was a thing. People do not know personal space. They don't understand it. So I'm very judgy when it comes to that. People who know me know that I judge people. Horrible habit. I try not to. It's a trait I don't like about myself, but it's very easy to pinpoint and to judge without this mask, when you see somebody without a mask. So for me, I don't want that in turn, because I'll be probably thinking that about myself. Like, if I just get a look walking around without my mask, I already know what it's going to be like, right? So for that alone, I'll still wear a mask. Not even for the fact that I don't want to get judged, but more so probably just if it makes people comfortable at this point, right? If you're worried about this vaccine, which you should be, in my opinion, I'll say that. If you are worried about this thing and you see somebody that's very close to you that doesn't have a mask or is wearing the mask like this, just, down below their nose, it makes you uncomfortable. Like, you don't want to be around people like that. This whole COVID-19 pandemic has really opened my eyes in terms of how gross people kind of are with germs. The fact that we haven't been washing our hands as much as we're washing them now, and the fact that we're not like super careful with what we're touching at the stores, people are gross. I'm very surprised I'm ashamed of myself that I wasn't doing this beforehand. Carrying a pack of wipes with me and wearing a mask and all that stuff. But you look at other cultures, particularly like Asian cultures, where mask wearing was a thing before COVID. It's no wonder why they've handled this so much better. And now that's not to say that like every Asian culture has handled this better, because there's some country. There's countries all over the world that are still tremendously struggling. India alone is not doing good because of COVID. And you look around, you see pictures. They're literally burning bodies in the street because they have nowhere else. They have no other way to handle it. And it's horrible, because you have like on the other side of the world where people are dealing with that. Yet here in the United States, you have people who are refusing to get the vaccines for one reason or another. They have their reasons. And it's just frustrating to see that happen. There's these people, there's these other countries that aren't fortunate enough to have the kind of resources that we have here, and people just don't understand that. People stubbornly think that they can just refuse it because they don't want it. And we have a lot of vaccines that are going to waste here. Think back a month or two ago, whatever it was, the fact that we had to get rid of, 15 million doses of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Like, I chuckled when I said that, because it's mind-blowing to think that was something we even had to do. Gosh, I really get off the rails when Kay's not here. I'm not trying to push like any certain agenda. I still just think that this virus is very serious, despite the fact that we've had X amount of people being vaccinated and things are getting a little bit better and the guidelines are being lifted little by little. And here in New Mexico, places are finally just opening up as of recording this. Movie theaters, places of entertainment, are going to be opened up tomorrow, May 1st, for the first time in a year. They have not been open to any capacity whatsoever. And for anybody who knows me, I'm a huge movie guy. I would go to the movies legitimately 4+ times a month. So that's been like one of the things I've hated the most. And I've kind of, been curious. Like, we were the last state to have our movie theaters opened, which sucks. But it is what it is. Things are closed. We got to get rid of it, we got to deal with it. Gosh, man, when Cade's not here, I just go off. But regardless, this thing is still very serious. I think we should take it very serious, despite things opening back up and seemingly getting back to normal. So I'm not trying to push, anything any particular way. I'm just kind of saying it based off of what I'm processing in my mind. So it's frustrating when you have people like Tucker Carlson pushing the no mask wearing. If you haven't seen it, he did a piece on the no mask outside myth, or whatever the hell he called it. And it was probably easily one of the most atrocious things that I've ever seen on live TV ever. He equates, I can't even quote it. I'll literally have to pull it up here, because I could be saying some of this stuff to you and it would sound like I'm bullshitting. And I really wish I was. But he insists that, and obviously I'm going to paraphrase here, so don't get upset if I'm not quoting exactly. He equates little kids, children wearing masks outside, to the same thing as a teacher taking your child and beating that kid in front of you. Tucker Carlson's idiot makes the statement like, if you see your kid's teacher punching that kid in the face, that anger that you have should be the same anger that you have when you see a child wearing a mask outside. He says he suggests, he doesn't even equate, he suggests that if you're walking down the street and you see a child wearing a mask outside, that you should call the police, child protective services, whatever, whoever needs to be called, because it's that he takes it that offended to you wearing a cloth over your mask, which is ridiculous. I've never personally understood you're wearing a mask offends me, or why people are so upset about that. I understand the inverse. I understand why people are offended by people who aren't wearing masks, but I genuinely do not understand this whole frustration that some people see when others are wearing masks, and calling there's somebody in particular, and I'm not even gonna name drop, but this person doesn't listen to this podcast, probably doesn't even know it exists, so that's okay, so I can talk about it. This person feels that way, and I'm trying so hard to get this person on the podcast because I want to talk to them about it, because I like to argue, for sure, definitely do, and I'm not one of those people who I'm just only going to push my point and I'm going to, that's it. Maybe sometimes I do that. I try not to do that. But for the most part, I genuinely have a hard time understanding what some of these people are thinking in their heads when it comes to stuff like this with the vaccine and the masks. And I genuinely want to talk to people like this because I just have follow-up questions. I can sit here and listen to an idiot like Tucker Carlson, or I could read something on Twitter about why these people are so upset about this, and I can get frustrated about it, but I can't follow up and I can't talk to them about it. I like to genuinely talk to people who have differences in opinions than me. That's just me. I like to see how people are comprehending, because there is sometimes in my head where I'm just, I do wonder, am I just being an asshole? Am I just being ignorant? Or am I, do I have a genuine reason to question this or to be upset about this? That's something I struggle with everything, every kind of counterpoint that I face in my life, which is probably not a good thing. But I process stuff like that. So I really want to get this person on this podcast. I think it'd be very interesting. And again, if I have anybody who's listening who feels that way, who's offended by mask wearing and offended by the vaccinations and offended that people who are getting vaccines can do certain stuff that those who can't, please reach out. I genuinely, not in a malicious way, would love to have a conversation about that. Anyways, if Cade were here, he'd be shushing me out. We would have been off this topic about 10 minutes ago. So we will move on. I want to talk about the NFL draft that happened last night. The first round of the NFL draft happened. Picks 1 through 32. The Jacksonville Jaguars kicked off the night, took Trevor Lawrence, who we've expected to be the first round pick since he was a freshman in high school. It was expected. The night actually was fun. The NFL draft is one of my favorite nights of the entire year. The entire football year. Me and my dad and a couple of my buddies and his buddies, we all kind of get together and we do a mock draft, and we put in $20 and winner takes all, whoever has the most points, or most picks correct. We have a point system. Last year, we didn't get to do that. We ended up doing something at my dad's house, and it was very low-key, but it was all kind of, it's like me, my dad, Cade. That was pretty much it. Everybody else, we just did it online. We usually go to someplace. Back in the day, we used to go to Hooters. Don't know why. My dad used to live at Hooters. This is a little side note. My dad and his friends were there every day. This was when my dad was single. Not anymore, so he's obviously not at Hooters anymore. But I remember my dad was probably there 2 to 3 times a week. Him and his buddies, they had their own table. They had a table. It was a prime spot. When you walk in, right before you walk out, they had their own little booth. They were there so often, and they were really cool with the manager and stuff, that they got a TV specifically for them put in the booth. So they had one, there's TVs everywhere, but they had one right in front of them, and they left them the remote. They had it a little spot where they would hide it so they could change the channel to whatever they wanted. So we were there constantly. To the point where, when I was even little, before I even liked football, I was probably 10 years old. I liked football, but I could not watch it often. I despised that place. We'd go there on Sundays, and we'd be there from noon, when the games kicked off at 11, all the way to halftime of Sunday night before we couldn't be there anymore. And it wasn't like my dad was just getting trashed. It was just his buddies were there and he just wanted to hang out with them. And got to the point where I just kind of despise that place. Like when I started actually watching football and started comprehending football and like knew some players and knew the teams and whatnot and followed it, I liked it. I could sit there and watch all the games. And they had the Game Pass or whatever, so I enjoyed it. But then it got to a point where, again, I just despise that place. Really despise that place. Little tangent. Anyways, we just did something low-key last night. We just, again, did our low mock draft. I tried to suggest the PFF, Pro Football Focus mock draft simulator. Very easy to comprehend. Very easy to navigate. And the people I was drafting with are like, again, my dad's buddies, and they're all in their 40s and 50s. Could not comprehend the website itself. Made the night very frustrating. Whatever. My dad had the most picks. We'll get back to the picks themselves. My team, the Indianapolis Colts, they took a player that I didn't think we were going to be able to take because I thought he was so good that he'd be picked within the top 15, Kwity Paye. Very excited about that. I had one of my buddies who's also a huge Colts fan. There's not many of us here in New Mexico who came by and watched the pick, and he was pretty ecstatic as well. Had Cade over, and the New England Patriots took Mac Jones, and he was not thrilled. I think he's going to be a good quarterback. For anybody who's talked to me about this draft, I think this is one of the best quarterback draft classes that I've seen in a very long time. If you look back at last year, not great. The year before, not great. The year before, not great. We have a really good, solid draft class for quarterbacks where we've had multiple players have like a longevity success since 2012. And even if you look at that, Andrew Luck retired. RG3 out of the league. Brandon Whedon's horrible. Ryan Tannehill's with a different team. Nick Foles, different team. So, I mean, that was a good class. Initially, looking back at it now, that was already 9 years ago. I guess it makes sense. But you just pretty much have Ryan Tannehill, Russell Wilson standing, and Kirk Cousins. Forgot about Kirk Cousins. So, anyways, I was super excited about this draft class. I personally think that all top 5 quarterbacks that went, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, Mac Jones, Trey Lance, and Zach Wilson, I think they're going to be all hits. I really do think they're all going to be successful in their own rights. And I really think they all landed in really good spots. I mean, we knew Trevor Lawrence was going to go to the Jags at 1. We knew Zach Wilson was going to go to the New York Jets at 2. 3, there was a huge toss-up. Trey Lance went to the San Francisco 49ers. That's an interesting spot because they're initially, I guess what they're saying is they're going to plan on letting whoever they pick there sit for a year while Jimmy Garoppolo starts. I don't think that's a good idea. I think when you invest that much into a quarterback and you pick him that high, I think you got to throw him into the fire and just let him start, especially a player like Trey Lance who didn't play. He played one game in 2020 because of COVID. He had 1 year of starting prior to that, but it's been 18 months roughly since he's played one game in 18 months. So if you give him another year to sit, you're going to be looking at close to 36 months, 3 years since that guy's played a game or played one game in that time. So I think their best bet is to let them start. There's a good chance, I'm filming this on Friday, the second and third round tonight. There's a good chance that Jimmy Garoppolo's gone by tonight and that Trey Lance is going to be a starter. Justin Fields, the Chicago Bears traded up to get Justin Fields. That was surprising, but I think that's a very good landing spot. I think the Bears are a better team than they are. Last year, they were obviously hindered by play by Mitchell Trubisky and Nick Foles. They went out and signed Andy Dalton, immediately branded him as quarterback 1, QB1. We'll see how that happens. I wouldn't be surprised if Justin Fields has to sit for a little bit, but obviously Justin Fields is a much more exciting prospect than Andy Dalton is at this point in his career. So that's a good landing spot. Chicago's a good team. And Mac Jones, I've always thought that was a good spot. There's a lot of people who kind of liken Mac Jones to Tom Brady just because of their stature. We'll say that. But I think, you got the Nick Saban and the Bill Belichick connection. I think Mac Jones will be very good. I think he was a really good quarterback in college. It's hard to kind of grade these Alabama quarterbacks just because Alabama had, 6 players picked in the first round last year? You constantly have Alabama players, skill players go constantly. So you had Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle and Najee Harris this year all go in the first round. So that's 2 wide receivers and a running back that Mac Jones had. So he's had elite talent. Even last year, you had 2 wide receivers from Alabama go in the first round and Henry Ruggs and Jared Jeudy. So that's 4 first-round wide receivers that Mac Jones was throwing to, Plus, you toss in Najee Harris, multiple first-round offensive linemen, Alex Leatherwood, who went to the Raiders this year, and Jedrick Wills, who went to the Browns last year. So it's hard to kind of gauge that, but excuse me 1 second. It's hard to gauge when a player has so much elite talent around him. Is he really that good, or is he just elevated? I think Mac Jones is good. He's going to go to a spot where he's going to get to sit behind Cam Newton, possibly for however long they decide to sit Cam Newton, and we'll see what he's about. I was excited to have Cam go back to New England the way he did too, because of the team he was dealt last year was horrible. We'll say that. And Cam didn't play well. He was horrible last year. And I think that was probably a mixture of him not like super being 100% ready, and him not having the full playbook, not a full offseason, no preseason to get to know his teammates. And the New England Patriots had more players opt out last year than any other team did because of COVID. And other than that, even if they had their players opted in, is not a good roster, offensively at least, for Cam Newton to work with. So I'm excited to see Cam step up, but I'm really excited to see Mac Jones and what he can do with Bill Belichick. Him going from Bill Belichick to Nick Saban, I think will be really good for him. Very similar quarterbacks, or very similar coaches for their quarterbacks. Excuse me. What else happened? The Jacksonville Jaguars took Travis Etienne. This was a pick that I thought was probably the second worst pick in the first round so far. I think Travis Etienne is a very fine running back. I think he's a good running back prospect. I really do. The selection, I don't think running backs should be first-round prospects. If you look at some of the best running backs in the NFL right now, they're not first-round picks. Look at the best rookie running back last year was Jonathan Taylor. Third running back taken off, he was taken in the second round. Some might argue that he's not the best. I think he's the best by far. He finished third in the NFL in rushing yards. Anyway, I don't think running backs are first-round prospects. I don't think they're valued as what they should be. That sucks, but there's other positions that are valued higher. So for the Jaguars to even take Travis Etienne in the first round, okay, it's like that's a little bit of a reach for the position of need when you're basing off what positions you need. Yeah, that might not have been where to go. And then you factor into the fact that they signed Carlos Hyde in the offseason. Carlos Hyde was not going to be the starter, but he's going to be a good rotational piece. He always has been. So okay, you're drafting a guy in the first round when you just signed this guy. And they have James Robinson, who was an undrafted rookie last year, who was phenomenal. He set the record for most scrimmage yards for an undrafted rookie ever. He was not only like one of the top rookie running backs, he was just one of the top running backs in the NFL. And that was with a poor offensive line and like not great play at quarterback. I love Gardner Minshew, but he was not set up to fail for sure. And then you have Mike Glennon and, I don't even remember the other guy that played. Regardless, he did not have good quarterback play, had a lot of stacked boxes against him, and he still was killing it. So I understand this need, this desire to kind of run a 1-2 punch and to bring back Travis Etienne with Trevor Lawrence and kind of get that Clemson connection, but that was not a pick that I think needed to be made. I think there was a reach position-wise, and I don't think that was a position that the Jaguars even needed. Say you want that 1-2 punch. You got James Robinson and Carlos Hyde. Those are two good running backs right there. They both kind of do something similar. Travis Etienne is going to do a lot more. I can definitely see the Jaguars running two running back sets with Etienne in the slot, but there was a lot of good players at like different positions that the Jaguars needed. Now, luckily for the Jaguars, the draft really ended up falling in a way that kind of set them up to succeed here in the second round. They're going to be picking first tonight in the second round. They needed tackle. That's what I thought they should have picked instead of Travis Etienne. Luckily for them, there's a good amount of tackles still available. So I guess it's a wash, right? We'll call that a wash for the Jags. Now, the Cincinnati Bengals. Okay. I'm coming at this. I've been coming at this as a Colts fan from the get-go, from when the mock draft season really started, because I personally saw a first overall quarterback who was an elite talent be ruined, literally ruined, his body destroyed because the team failed to adequately put people in front of him to protect the guy. right? I'm obviously talking about Andrew Luck. Andrew Luck was a once-in-a-generation talent who, in the early years with him in Indianapolis, never had a good offensive line. He had Anthony Costanzo at left tackle, Joe Wrights for a little bit, I believe, at right tackle. Other than that, constant moving pieces in front of him, and it showed. He was one of the most hit quarterbacks in the NFL. He was never one of the most sacked quarterbacks, because Andrew Luck was really good at extending the plays and kind of getting out of those, and he was a really good runner. But Andrew Luck retired in 2019 or whatever. Gosh, it's already been that long. In 2019, because he was injured too much. He took too many hits too early on, and it ended his career way before it should have. And that sucks. And I still regret that every day. I wake up and I see my Andrew Luck jersey and I cry a little bit. I genuinely get sad because I know we should have had way more success with Andrew Luck than we did. We didn't get to see his best football, and that really sucks. Joe Burrow is something special. I'm not going to say he's Andrew Luck special, but I think his last year at LSU, he really showed us what he could do. And even into his rookie year with a bad Bengals team, he really showed us that he has the ability to be a good quarterback in the NFL. Until he tore his ACL and his MCL. Joe Burrow was on his ass the entire season. You can go look it up. There's literally highlights of hits against Joe Burrow because he was just constantly being torn apart. Had no time to throw. He had no open receivers. I get that. But he had no time to throw. He was running for his life, and he was taking huge hits. And you don't want that for a young quarterback. Like, you might think that they're young. They can kind of take a little bit hit. If it was like an older quarterback, it might scare you a little bit more. But no, these guys, they put miles on their bodies, man. When they're getting hit constantly like that, it'll catch up. It'll catch up to them. So I really think that they should have picked someone like Penei Sewell. Gosh, this is hard when I'm sitting here talking about myself, my throat. They should have picked somebody like Penei Sewell, who's an elite offensive lineman talent. Somebody who has the potential to be one of the best tackles in the league. I mean, he's so young, he didn't play last year, we'll see. But he has that potential. Instead, the Bengals picked a wide receiver. They picked Jamar Chase out of LSU, another player who didn't play last year. And I understand that need LSU connection, right? Joe Burrow played with Jamar Chase. He was his top receiver that year in 2020 or 2019. So I understand that desire to kind of get a familiar guy for your quarterback, for your young quarterback. But they already have Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins. Those are two top receivers. Below that, not much going on there. But those are still two top receivers. Like, that receiver is definitely not your biggest need. I think they should have prioritized putting a good line in front of him. This is a very deep wide receiver class. It's a deep offensive line class as well. But in my opinion, and I don't think I'm alone here, I think if you look at a lot of draft boards, you'll kind of see stuff breaking down a little bit too. If you look at a lot of big board rankings, in my opinion, Jamar Chase was the third best wide receiver in this class. Now, don't get me wrong. I think Jamar Chase is phenomenal. I think he's going to be a great NFL receiver. He was a great college receiver. I think he's amazing. And any other draft, I don't think taking him at, what did they take him at, 5 would have been a reach. But you have Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle right there in front of you. I think those are two phenomenal players. Some of the best wide receiver draft prospects I've ever seen. Said the same thing about Jerry Jeudy last year. I still feel that way. I think those two players are better at what they do than Jamar Chase. I really do. I think Jalen Waddle is an elite slot receiver. He's got amazing speed. He's got blazing speed. He was hurt last year, but I mean, he went right after at 7 to the Dolphins. To the 6 to the Dolphins. So I would have picked either of those two before I would have picked Jamar Chase. That's just me. So not only did they pick a position that they probably didn't need at the 5th overall spot, but they picked a player that they probably could have done a little bit better than. So it's a little frustrating. If you're not a fan of sports, I apologize for holding you up for that long. I like I said, the NFL draft is one of my favorite times of year. I could sit here and kind of do that. I could talk about that forever. Well, hopefully I get Kate on with me next week. Again, we always say this, we're going to make this more frequent. It's just finding the time to sit down. We set up the studio a little bit more so we can kind of have a good little back and forth. I won't move the camera, but just so we can have a good little more of a conversation, so we're not just sitting next to each other and talking like this. So be on the lookout for that. I wanted to get something out. I have stuff I wanted to get off my chest. I don't know how long I would have been able to talk about that Tucker Carlson mask vaccine stuff with Kate here, so that's nice. I'll get this off my chest. Something else to look forward to in the future. I am going to be starting another podcast, taking on another project. I want to be time and name TBD, but the topic of this podcast is going to be film, TV shows, movies. I want to be looking at trailers. I want to be reviewing movies. I want to be talking about TV shows. I want to be talking about anything that has to do with the movie industry. I'm fascinated by that. Absolutely love that topic, and I think there's constantly topics to be talked about in that little realm. And so that's something I'm going to be starting pretty soon. So keep an eye on that. I think it'll be a cool project that I'm looking forward to hopefully getting ready to do pretty soon. So keep an eye out for that. Other than that, we still have Know Your Balls going. The Mental Debrief podcast is doing great. We're going to be making some tweaks to our Politics Refresh podcast as well. So just subscribe and keep an eye out for it. Make sure to check out this podcast. You can get it on anywhere you listen to your podcasts: Google Podcasts, Apple, Spotify, YouTube. You can go directly to Tonique.com and you can watch it on there. You can go to TellABQ.com, go to TellABQ Podcast Radio and listen to us there. Listen to any of the ones I just mentioned on there. So you can't avoid us. We're everywhere. Make sure to check us out. Keep listening. Hopefully you can come back, and we'll be back next week, and hopefully I'll have Cade with me. But that's pretty much all I got today. Thank you for letting me just vent and talk for 30 minutes. This was actually a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. So have a good one. See you next week.